All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Hello, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And this week, we decided to get a little romantic with it as we get into February, decided to get really sexy with it. And let's face it, we got kind of horny with it. We're talking The Love Witch. Dave, this was your recommendation. How did you find this movie?
The iTunes is a beautiful thing because they'll have sales every once in a while, and I am the kind of person who's always looking for a good sale. I am somewhat of a thrifty person.
Cool.
And so when something comes up and it catches my eye and it is fairly inexpensive, I'm like, what is this? And so I did a little bit of reading after watching the trailer. The trailer had me from the get-go. I was like, this is incredible. What is this? Because it looked like a Technicolor film from the 60s, but there were modern cars. And I was like, okay, so what exactly is going on here? And after doing a little bit of digging, I was like, okay, I got to watch this movie. And so I committed to it. I paid the $5. I feel like I owe Anna Biller much more money because I definitely got my money's worth. And it's one of those movies where I don't recommend it often because I feel like it is a very specific kind of movie. But it is one that is just it's jarring and it's beautiful to look at. I mean, this is a celebration of Hollywood.
Yeah, what's amazing about this movie is, it's like it's a gumbo of all these different things. I mean, it's obviously just this beautiful homage to the 40s and 50s and 60s, to Hammer horror. I mean, down to the poster that we put up on our Instagram. I mean, there's a lot of love here, but it's also a great satire in in the way that it does things. So just kind of, how do you feel about this movie overall? I know you're saying you definitely got your money's worth, but take us through your ride of this movie.
So I'll start with this. Before any of the like set design and costume design, the music, the editing, and any of that stuff, Samantha Robinson, who plays the titular Love Witch.
Yes.
Elaine Parks is distractingly beautiful.
Honestly, when I heard that D come out of your mouth, the first word that I thought, she's destructively gorgeous. Like just wreck my world. Just take it all.
Whatever adjective you want to put before beautiful or gorgeous, or I mean, it needs an adjective and the adverb modifying the adjective. There's no word that can describe the beauty that this woman has. I mean, it's and I know that that's part of the character,
right?
She needed to be cast that way. So it's what's incredible to me is that among the situations that she finds herself in, where she's accentuating and objectifying herself, there's still a pull away from that because of the brilliance of the direction and the writing. Yes. Where you're still not focusing on her body and on her beauty. It's on the surroundings. It's on the effects. It's on the set, the decor, the whatever it is that's going on at that moment. So this movie is an incredible thing, because you're, as a man, I'm watching this and I'm like, that is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. Like Ingrid Bergman, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, she could hang in there with them.
Yes.
But then at the same time, like, I'm picking up on all these feminist vibes that are being put out there, and I'm like, I am here for this. I'm along for the ride. I like to think of myself as not to sound too douchey, but as a somewhat woke individual. So I upon watching this movie, this is now the second time I've seen it. Watching this movie the first time, I was like, man, this is just fucking awesome. This should be required viewing for becoming a man. Because
Okay.
it's one of those incredible views into the female psyche and what we as men drive women to do. And to me, more than anything else, I think that's what's most interesting about this movie. It's not how beautiful Samantha Robinson is. It's not the incredibly seductive dances that she does. It's the commentary on expectations that both women have of men, and that women feel men have of them, which of course is totally valid and more than likely close to 100% accurate.
Yeah, this was my first time seeing this. When we started talking about, like romance type of horror movies to do in February, you're like, dude, we've got to do Love Witch. So like I've had it back there in the back of my head, like, all right, we're definitely going to do this one. So I go to fire it up yesterday, and really no idea what I'm in for. Kind of catch a blip on, as it starts, and it's like a tribute to Technicolor films. And I was like, okay, cool. I dig that. And man, as soon as it starts, like, you're assaulted with what movies used to look like. Right. And I was like, okay. It was definitely a hell of a ride. There was a lot of just weird things but at no point were any of them ever take me too far out of the movie. I did like a lot of I did like the look at some of what they did was homage, and some of it was satirical. Exactly. There were times when they did things that were like, that's like straight out of Suspiria, right? And then there are times they did things and it's like, that is making fun of Suspiria. like both of those things coexisted within this movie, which was incredible. The comparison that I made when it was over was, it felt like a horror movie version of Kill Bill in a way.
Actually, wow, that's a really, really good comparison. I think
it's obviously comes from a place of deep love and deep respect for what these movies did, but also is very aware of how ridiculous things could be. And it wasn't afraid to do both of those things to extremes. It did not shy away from creating scenes that if you took those frames and you dropped them straight in a Hammer horror, they would fit and nobody would notice. But then it also, I mean, man, when it made fun, when it went the satire route, there's a scene where her friend, the British lady, her husband kills himself because he has just fallen so deeply in love with Elaine that he can't live without her. And he ends up committing suicide. And she walks in and she finds him in the bathtub, wrist slit, arms out, blood, water poured out of the tub. Classic wrist slitting scene. And then she goes to scream, and we get this great like Hammer horror zoom, but they zoom in on her mouth.
Yeah.
And like they hit right on that mouth. And it's like, and it's just kind of like barely a scream, but at the same time, it's like her mouth is filling up my whole TV. And I was like, that is so weird, but I love it. It did a
And
lot
there
of
were more British people in this Northern California town than I think I've ever seen in all of Northern California.
right.
Which is also another great callback to the Hammer horror stuff. You know, you needed to have your Peter Cushing and your Christopher Lee in there.
Yes.
You know, the
And
great
so
English accents.
it did. It did a lot of fun stuff. You're right. At the very beginning, I found myself desperately trying to place this movie in time because she's driving a mid 60s Mustang. It's 66, 67, somewhere around there. But then the cop pulls her over and his car's more modern. And I was like, interesting. Then she gets to this town and this town is old. And I'm like, okay. But then you're right. The cars are newer. So I'm like, okay, maybe they just didn't budget in needing to have cars around. And
there were cell phones.
Yeah.
But she answers the cell phone in a tea room, in a Victorian tea room.
Yes. And then eventually, yes, her phone rings and and I was like, okay, she's got an iPhone. Like, all right, so this is modern day. They're just somewhere like Salem where everybody just lives a cosplay all the time. But while at first I thought that was going to be distracting, that ended up being part of the appeal of this movie was the fact that it didn't care if you knew when it took place. Yeah, there were cell phones. It was obvious it was modern times, but you get a couple scenes away from that, you forget somebody has a cell phone, and you're watching this cop in his giant shoulder pad coat go out and pour himself coffee, and they're having these conversations like it's Mayberry, about who you mess with and who you don't. It's like, wait, maybe it is old. I don't know, but you stop caring.
Not even in
much.
Wall Street did Michael Douglas wear a suit with padding that
his
big
shoulders
in the shoulders?
Were so big, like Glenn Close going to the Oscars in the 80s, big. And so there was so much fun to be had in this movie. And you're absolutely right, and we'll talk about it more when we get to ratings. It's not one where every time I meet somebody and they tell me they like a scary movie, I'll be like, oh, watch Love Witch.
Right.
But it definitely has its place. I really enjoyed watching it. It was super weird, and we're going to get into all just the bizarre stuff. But one thing that was that was great to me, and it's the type of thing that goes back to one of the things that makes Hereditary to me is while it was obviously about a witch and about witchcraft, they put the time into making sure the things that they were saying were accurate to the best of my knowledge. Like I said, it's a hobby learning about occult.
You are our occult specialist here.
But they also very smartly they didn't dig too deep. They didn't put themselves in a hole where they were just going to have to try to talk themselves out of it with a bunch of magical sounding words, right? They didn't just have to start talking about the astral plane because they were stuck. It's like when you're watching a hacker movie and it's obvious that the person or like the movie Hackers, and it's obvious that the people who wrote it know a little bit about computers, and then they get in real deep and they just start like Googling buzzwords. They never dug themselves a hole quite that deep. And so that was really good because there was a minute where we meet the people from her coven, and they start like dropping all these like types of classes that they teach in this, and I was like, ooh, like they're starting to drop some real like Aleister Crowley shit here, like they better toe this line really careful. And then they just move on, and I'm like, cool, you did it, right? You hit me with the buzzwords, but then you didn't pretend like you knew what they meant, even if the writer did, right? And they didn't force it upon me. And that was great. It did a lot of really good things. I had no idea. Like, I had zero expectations of this movie. When I hit play, all I had was a poster that went up on our Instagram. Yeah. That was all I knew about it. And I was like, who is this woman? And I need to watch a movie with her in it.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I went into it the first time as well. I was just like, wow, this actress is gorgeous, and I'll watch anything with her in it. So, but you touched upon something that I think is really central to this movie's core. You called it weird. And it definitely is weird because it's like you said, it's a gumbo. You just throw a bunch of stuff in this pot, and it either works or it doesn't. We talked recently about We Need to Do Something.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned you said the same thing there, where it was kind of like a gumbo pot. You just threw a bunch of stuff in there, and some of the stuff works and some of the stuff doesn't. In this movie, everything from choice of film stock, because it was shot on 35 millimeter film, to editing techniques, because it was edited on 35 millimeter film, to costuming, set design. Everything about this movie is the vision of Anna Biller. And she wrote, directed, edited. I mean, if she could have written the music, I'm pretty sure she would have done that too. You know? So when you're trying to bring something to film, right? What does this do to the film as a whole, and then as like the parts as well, the parts that make up the whole?
So what's amazing about this movie is you can tell that, when this movie was made, it's like Oscilloscope Productions or something like that is the name of it. The creator of this movie was never, it would seem as though no one ever tried to rein her in. And in a world where that's constantly happening. And while so often we do get great movies that are a decently pure idea of what the creator's vision were, when I watched this movie, I couldn't help but think that there isn't a director's cut for this, because every bit of this movie is exactly the vision that she had. I did look into the creation process today, because I was interested in how they got that look so specific. And I was like, oh, because they just made it like that.
Yeah.
Like you said, they actually filmed it on 35 millimeter. And like they probably had that machine, right, where it like chops right on it.
Yep.
And then they put them together. And so it was incredible to see something from beginning to end fully encompass what must have been the creator, director, writer's vision for what a movie should be. It was, like I said, as soon as it starts, you've got Elaine driving the car, and it's this really classic looking scene where it's like obviously special effects behind her, right? There's a screen back there.
It reminded me very much of those old Alfred Hitchcock movies,
Yes.
where the femme fatale is driving away from something and you don't know what yet.
Exactly. And so, but then, and then there's this real harsh shift when she gets pulled over. And even though you're looking, you're like, okay, that's obviously a pretty modern California. But then the cop pulls up, and just the way that it looks. And that was so important to the movie as a whole. But there are just so many great little technical things that they did, like we said, that when you look at the way everybody's dressed and everybody's hair is styled, it leaves you with those moments where you're wondering, when is this supposed to be taking place? And just the moment she got out of that car at the very beginning, there, like I said, it was this real harsh transition of what everything looked like. But it worked so well. And it just reminded me of so many things. The music, the scoring, just that somebody just banging on an organ, right? like sometimes it really feels like there's no rhyme or reason to it. Just somebody just smashing keys and seeing what happens. Like it came across as like this pure emotion, while also, being like, okay, remember when this was like really scores for like important high up movies, and like this is what their scores sounded like? That was fun, right? And so they did a lot of great things. Some of the set design on our background here, we've got the wallpaper that was in Elaine's apartment that she was renting, and it was so cool looking, and it was so kitschy, and it was so on the nose. And while we have used on the nose as a derogatory thing before on this podcast, this movie, the entire thing is supposed to be on the nose, right? So she walks in and the lady even tells her, she's like, oh, this room is tarot inspired. And she was into all this witchcraft and stuff like that.
And she's like, yeah.
Yeah. She's like, oh, I know. And so she walks in and it's just like, oh, wow. Like she meant it. Like just statues of naked people and bizarre paintings and
stained glass windows.
Yes, the stained glass windows, just straight up pentacle, just right there in the stained glass window, stuff like that. Just so much of that stuff, it fit this movie so perfectly that you just know, without seeing a behind the scenes featurette, you know that it's just exactly what the person wanted to make. That purple house. Just that giant purple house.
Gorgeous. Oh,
it's beautiful.
I'm pretty sure that I would murder someone to live in that house. You know, not someone I like, you know,
right.
But not someone I really dislike either, because I don't want to be pegged for it.
Right.
You know, but someone, maybe I've never met this person.
You know, like that whole, it's like push the button on this box and somebody you've never met dies. You get this house, but ding.
Yeah. Okay. It. Yeah.
So
I can get on board with that.
There we go. But like I said, it's just, you know, we talked about and it's funny. Like I said, I keep referencing Hereditary, but we got that same type of feel. Now, when we got to Midsommar, we did eventually find out, you know, or we did know there was a director's cut, but it was probably just because of length. But still, that's still a studio coming at you and telling. I mean, not even Marvel is immune from a studio controlling their vision because of, you know, mainly numbers in China. It seems like it's always the number one reason that's coming out. But it was a breath of fresh air to see something like this from beginning to end and just know that you were living inside of someone's masterpiece.
Yeah, and I kind of felt that way too, because it happens so infrequently, I think. And you do have to go into that like independent film world to find that. And the as kind of, I think of myself as like an average Joe, you know, like I don't think that I'm hoity-toity. I don't think I'm particularly bougie. You know, I do like a lobster bisque every now and then, you know, throw some lobster in that mac and cheese, but I don't think I'm particularly bougie, you know. So I'm not the artsy fartsy kind that needs to see art house movies all the time. But the problem is that with independent movies, that's typically what you get those art house movies.
Just the one French lady smoking a cigarette.
Yeah,
in black and white.
It's like an Andy Warhol movie where it's just 8 hours of a dude on a bed, you know? And it's like, okay, listen, I mean, that one testicle's nice, but let's move past this. Let's see something else, you know? So it's really nice to see like a complete movie, something that there not only is an attempt at, but like a really good attempt at making a movie. And although I do think that this is more of an exploration of female sexuality than it is a movie itself. Because I do think that this is stronger as a collection of ideas than it is a movie. It is 100% someone's vision, one person's vision.
Right.
And that so rarely happens that you get something that is uniquely someone's vision. This happens in the music industry. You know, you'll get someone like an Adele who can put out an album and it is exactly what she heard in her mind, or like a Lady Gaga, right? Who put something out and it's like, this is exactly what I heard in my head from start to finish. You know, you see this obviously with artists, you see it with writers, with authors, but you don't see this in the film industry because of, you know, the monster that is the studio system. And so it's great to see this here. And then of course, it happens to be a movie that both celebrates and satirizes something I love so much, which are those cheesy 60s horror movies where it's all atmosphere.
Yes.
It's not jump scares. It's not even really the murders or anything
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that,
this
because
movie was zero jump scares. Like it was
none.
scary because of what was going on at times, but
Yeah.
there were no jump scares.
None at all, and the horror here is real horror when you start looking at what the witch is an allegory for. The witch is as womanhood,
Right.
and I think that when you give one person, the right person, the ability to make whatever they want, and give them a voice and say your voice is valid and should be heard, right? Now go. You can get something like this. And everything from the costumes. Anna Biller said that she was like hand stitching costumes together, that she was buying fabric from one vintage dress to sew onto another vintage dress to get the exact look that she wanted. The rug that's in her room, the one with the pentagram on it, she handmade.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous rug, but
really is.
where are you going to find something like that? It doesn't exist. Not in the colors you want, right? When you need them to pop in this, old Technicolor style. So that's and when you see that amount of effort put into anything, it must be applauded, and not just a golf clap. I'm talking like standing ovation. Insert gif of standing ovation here.
Yes.
That's the sort of acknowledgement that this sort of work needs, because when you do have the vision and you're allowed to pull it off the way that you want to, that is an incredible thing. And I think that we haven't seen something like that in the studio system since the late 70s, early 80s, when guys like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese were tipping the studio system on its head.
Yeah. So as we talk about the things that when we talk about the vision, obviously you even said, it kind of works better as a collection of ideas. So let's look at the story and the characters that we're presented with here, for good and for bad. What we have is one contiguous story about a woman who just wants someone to be in love with her, and the lengths that she will go to for that. So when you're looking at it as a work of satire, as an homage, as a story, all of those things hinge on the characters that we're given, and how it plays out over the course of this 2 hours long. So over 120 minutes, how does it play out? So as you look at the Technicolor aspects, the homage parts versus the modern work, the very obviously modern feminist ideals that are presented here, how do you think that those things blended together into what they presented as this movie's story?
I think they blend together like pretty seamlessly, as seamless as the carpet in her room. Anna Biller is a pretty great seamstress, and I think that plot can be used for different things, right? Plot can be used to tell an intriguing story, a la Alfred Hitchcock style movies. Should have just said Hitchcockian. Sorry about that. Or stories can be used to explore ideas, right? I think that the Suspiria remake is kind of like that, where the story kind of just meanders, but it's because it's exploring an idea a lot more than the original Suspiria does. The original Suspiria uses story to frighten, and it uses story to progress this this narrative forward. It's using story to scare you, right? This movie uses story and its characters simply as a way to explore ideas, and the ideas that are being explored is the difference between how men and women experience romance, the expectations that there are of relationships, and you have Elaine on one side, and you have Trish on the other side, and Elaine obviously representing everything that is trauma, and
Right.
Trish representing the modern ideal of feminism, right? I don't give my husband sex because he needs sex or wants sex. I give him sex because that's something I want to do at that moment.
Right.
And Elaine argues that is the way to get a man to love you, and we see her doing all of those very stereotypical I Love Lucy housewife things, having the slippers ready at the door sort of thing,
the big breakfast, the huge breakfast.
Big breakfast. Yeah.
Even after she, like we get this internal monologue of her where she just quite literally, she's like, man, what a pussy.
Yes.
Like, I thought I finally found a man, and now this guy's just a sobbing mess. But she's still making this huge breakfast and going up and consoling him. And I love you because, yeah, it's I Love Lucy-esque.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the most interesting things about this movie, that inner monologue about how he's just a big pussy, because what she has wanted is love, right? And he's on the verge of tears because while she's still in his presence, because he loves her so much at that point, right? And what she wants is the love of a traditional man, but now he's assumed more of that feminine role, right? He's lost that traditional masculinity, and it's no longer something that she finds appealing. And that was one of those things that I found really, really interesting. It's like, okay, so feminine love does not mean or rather, what the love that the woman looks for is not necessarily any kind of love, but it's a specific kind of love, right? And it's because it's every one person needs a different kind of love. You can't tell someone like, hey, this is the love that you're getting because this is the love that I have to give. Well, then you're not the right match, and so we see her in all these different scenarios, and granted, we don't know if we can trust everything she says about Jerry, her first husband, because she continually twists the truth. She's not a very trustworthy narrator. However, I am more than willing to believe that he was abusive, because we do get voiceover narration.
There it is. Yeah.
Jerry and her father, right? Where they are clearly abusive, even if only emotionally abusive and not physically abusive. And I hate to say only emotionally abusive,
right,
because in many ways that can be worse, and so that's really where all this stems from, and then there's this idea that the witchcraft comes and saves her, and there's this rebirth into the woman that she is now, except that the witchcraft that came and saved her is twisting what female empowerment really is. It's kind of in a lot of those ways where you hear that that stripping or hooking or something is actually empowerment, female empowerment, and there is a lot to say about that, where it's like, I'm going to take my own body and I'm going to do with it what I want, and I'm going to take your money and make myself empowered with it, because if you're willing to pay me to just look at me, then I'm willing to show you,
right?
But that's not what's going on in the head of the person who's throwing those singles at you.
Well, and what's awesome about that idea of the witchcraft twisting things too is the guy who was running the coven, what was that he had?
Gain, was it?
Gain, yes, that's it. Gain. Yeah. It was this really weird thing, because while you're right, it took that idea and twisted it, but he was so upfront with it, right? Like when you read stories of Aleister Crowley taking this idea of magic and basically just turning it into, using it to make himself the most feared man in the world. And he just used it because he was just always desperately seeking a new power bottom. Dude, truth.
Yeah.
And so, you see a lot of that in this guy Gain, right? Where it's like, man, this guy is very much portraying that one dude that goes to every party, like he's just like that real hipstery douche guy who knows like just enough about feminism to try to make himself seem like a lot more than he is. And that was the feeling that I got from Gain as a character. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. This guy talks a big game about female empowerment, but then we get the flashback to, her initiation scene. And it's like, that's kind of rapey.
Yeah. You're clearly taking advantage.
Yeah. And there are these girls that I think they said they were, if they were, I don't remember if they said their age, but they didn't look like they'd been 18 long. Right. If they were 18 at all, and he's just engrossed with them and how quickly they're coming along. And so it became this idea of while witchcraft is what saved her and brought her to where she is, also maybe what she's been taught as the norm is this perverted version of it, which has only led to more trauma, which is a really interesting look into, healthy versus unhealthy coping mechanisms. It's great. It is great to go out there and find something, anybody's life can be saved by anything. We've had the talk before about different things where it's like, well, like in Midsommar, it's like, well, yeah, but maybe her life's better now, even though she chose to kill her boyfriend. And so that was really weird.
Definitely
to me.
Better without that asshole.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, exactly. But like, doubt was like his facial. And I was like, man, this guy is supposed to be like an even creepier straight version of Aleister Crowley. And this idea of sex magic, and all things coming, the birthplace of all things. And that's why that's why he had to get at that cooch, right? Because that's the old fertile valley.
Right.
And so it was interesting to see, because at first when we meet her, that's exactly what we're presented with, this idea of the fact that witchcraft was so empowering to her and it made her who she was. And then they did a really good job of, one, talking about how the town might, is obviously going to put her in a box right away. Like, they accept witches, but maybe they don't. We all accept things until we don't, right? So they're all accepting the witches because they've been there, but she's in this box of, she's a witch. We'll put up with her. And so we're like, okay, well, so she's chosen this life. That was very brave of her, because she's never, she's very brazen about the fact that she's a witch. Right. It's never like a behind closed doors thing. But then once we learn more about it, it's like, oh my God, this woman has been taken advantage of at every turn, and then the one thing that she thinks has made her who she is continually making her life more difficult. And while she definitely did seem to have some understanding of that, like when she first runs into Gain and she turns her face, so he can only kiss
there's
her
a
cheek.
Definite disdain there.
Yes.
Like she still seems to really love and appreciate Barbara, who I got very like Ghislaine Maxwell vibes from Barbara.
Yeah.
Where it was like, she may not necessarily believe in all this, and she's kind of just using it as a way to be powerful.
Yeah, to further her agenda.
To further her agenda, and whatever she needs to do to gain his his snatch. Then.
Yeah, exactly. And by helping provide that, then she's put into this position of power within that coven. And if that's, it's in the idea of power is always interesting, right? Because there are people who don't view themselves as powerful unless they're in charge of a lot of people. Our former president is just always hungry for power. His entire life revolved around what people thought of him and that they had to think he was the greatest person ever.
Right.
Barbara was very happy to just be in that position with her coven. She seemed like she had found her lane, and as long as the people there viewed her as being in a position of power, she was okay with that. And if that meant she had to turn a blind eye to the fact that Gain was obviously super creepy, then she was willing to do that. So that was fascinating to me, because just the two sides of the witchcraft that we were presented with. Also, the third side of that witchcraft we're presented with, God damn, did this movie love some Full Frontal.
Yes.
We're going to talk story. We're going to talk visuals, talk about some visuals where it's just like, all right, witch time, y'all get ass naked.
Everyone was naked. There was cock and balls. There was vagina. There was boobies.
Man,
so many boobies.
Equal opportunity Full Frontal too. That there was one dude who was like so old he could just barely like kneel down, and he couldn't do it that well. And then when they all stood up, he could just barely stand up, and we had to see that man's ding dong. So you know
what? It might have been like a lifelong dream of his. He's like, you know what? Since I was a boy, I wanted to be in a movie. And then someone came along and they were like, sir, we're going to make that happen. Are you willing to take off your pants? They're already off.
Yeah,
what more do you want?
Didn't put them on this morning because I forgot. So here we go. It looks like a button wearing a fur coat. Enjoy. Right? So
that is what it looked like.
That's exactly what it looked like.
Yeah.
And so it was, but man, like, it was also interesting in the fact that it was never presented in a vulgar way. They even went to they went to a burlesque club. It was not a strip club. So, it was a burlesque club, which, by the way, shout out to the amazing April Showers, who showed up and did her routine in there, and her amazing nipple tassel work. And that's not even just a sexual thing.
It is unrivaled.
That's an incredible thing to be able to do. Like, I mean, she's spinning them the same way, opposite ways, like one at a time. And that's incredible. That's incredible.
It took me years to even get close to that.
Yeah, exactly. So make sure you head to our official merch store where you can buy your Shiver branded nipple tassels. But it was, so they go to this burlesque club, and while, in this idea of this movie and the feminist ideal, it was always presented, the nudity was always presented in a way that was part of the storytelling. It was never vulgar. It was never, too over the top. Like, they could have very well gone full Aleister Crowley and given us this big explanation about how, we need, like, you're supposed to use cum, not blood, because blood magic is barbaric and all that. And we could have had to watch all of that happen. But, they left that up to the imagination. And they just gave us, the idea that this coven is very free with their bodies, and they were okay with that. And it was kind of rad. And again, just like in Midsommar, equal opportunity, Full Frontal. I'm here for it. Like, if you're gonna put somebody naked, put everybody naked. I'm okay. Like, it's not gonna traumatize me to see an old man wiener. I've been to a YMCA shower. They love to have a conversation. So just it was great in the fact.
In all fairness, the best way to dry your balls is to air dry them.
Oh, I agree 100%.
So as long as I'm waiting, I mean, I might as well have a conversation.
Yeah. So it was there were a lot of great things about the story, a lot of fun little things. Just the idea that she moves to this town and they just happen to have like a magical herb shop, and they're like, hell yeah, we'll sell your witch bottles, bring it on.
It's almost like this takes place in an alternate universe.
Yes,
where like witchcraft became I don't know, like the fourth most popular religion in the world.
Yeah.
Where it's like a like above Hinduism and above Buddhism, and it's just like it's right there because she talks about it in a way with the police officer. What the hell was his name? Griff. She talks about it with Griff, and she was like, "Oh, much in the same way as your Christianity."
Yeah,
and it's so flippant in the way that she says it, and I do know that witchcraft and Wicca and all, it is a religion that is taken seriously by those who practice it. But in the eyes of the public, I mean, it certainly isn't.
Yeah, I mean, you would, based on the things you hear, you garner the assumption that Wicca is still just something that's like, it's just a bunch of hippies in the woods,
right?
And and that's as far as it goes. And so to be in this town where they're just like, she's one of those witches, and for the cops to sit around and be like, this town has had a great relationship with the witches for a long time, so I say we stop investigating this.
To me, it was like. It was exactly like those Hammer horror movies where there was like the village pub, and like the new guy who was strolling into town was looking for the castle,
yes,
where all the vampires or the werewolves or the Gorgons or whatever lived, and everyone would be like, we're not going up that way. No, sir, it's not going to happen.
That was the exact same voice I was going to do that bit in, because you're right. It's like somebody goes into town, they're like, make sure you get to bed on time. There's werewolves around here. And it's like, what? We just discussed that over a pint now? Like, shouldn't you call somebody? And so the story that's told here, it's so bizarre because of these things they're just out there. And but it's also told in such a way where you're just like, yep, all right, cool town. Should visit sometime.
It can only exist in that town.
Yeah, it's almost like this is such a bizarre comparison. It's almost like Napoleon Dynamite, right? Like,
okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Nobody lives to the extremes that the characters in Napoleon Dynamite do, but in this one town that they're in, they're just somebody else. Oh, that's just Napoleon. That's that was the feel it had at times, where it's just like, I'm done trying to place this in time in the United States. I'm just along for the ride at this point.
That's how I felt about. Did you ever see one called Kung Fury?
Yes.
Oh my God, I love this movie. I watch it multiple times a year. I love it so much that even
that's the one with the woodchuck chucks, right?
The woodchuck chucks,
beaver chucks.
No,
maybe I'm thinking of a different movie. I do remember Kung Fury, though. I swear there was a movie where a guy had nunchucks made of like beavers or woodchucks or something. Anyway, I thought it was Kung Fury.
It's the one where Hitler travels in time to become the Kung Führer.
Yes, that's right, the Kung Führer. Okay, okay, yes, back on board now.
Yeah, and it starts off in 1985 Miami that does not exist. It never existed. Like that Miami, like not even on Miami Vice was that Miami the real Miami. And yet it feels like, oh no, yeah, that's it. That's the world, and the the Viking era that he goes back to, with laser raptors. Like it's like, yeah, that is the realm in which this takes place, and it feels totally natural. And there's something, and a lot of that has to do with the characters and the characterization as well. Griff is that stereotypical policeman.
Oh my God. So we were talking earlier about when he's like, we leave those witches alone, and the guy starts arguing with him and he punches him. For the audio listener, these are the biggest air quotes I could possibly make. Like that was so laugh out loud, perfect and amazing and funny, and one of those satirical moments that just could not have been any better. Because the dude like goes, like an HBK bump, right? Just goes flying back like Shawn Michaels, and then it's just like, that dude, I don't even think he straightened his elbow.
No, it was like a rock'em sock'em robot.
It was like one of those punching nuns.
And And the sound effects sounded like you blew air into like a brown paper bag and just went pop. You know,
Yes.
like it was like obviously bad. Like it was supposed to be, and
Yes.
it was so funny. It's so good. You know, and you know, characters like Richard and how sleazy he is. You know, like everything about this is I think handled so perfectly. Um and of course the star really is Samantha Robinson. Like she is the thread that holds everything together. Without her performance, it's just the movie works, but you need her to have it work as well as it does. She really understood what made uh starlets in the 60s like Britt Eklund and Ingrid Pitt such like incredible hammer bombshells.
Yeah.
You know, like you need what was it about Caroline Munro that made her absolutely irresistible in these movies, not just to the men in the movies, but to the men watching the movies, right? And it wasn't her acting, you know, it was the way that she acted, but it wasn't the acting itself, right? And it was a certain gravitas that you bring to the role, like an intangible thing that that she really embodied, because she is actually a really great actress. She was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Yes.
and she was like astounding in the movie. You know, a totally different acting style, right? Like this is not Hayden Christensen, you know, where like the acting gets nominally better if you move away from Star Wars. Like, you know, she delivered a very specific performance for this movie. And I mean, personally, I loved it. I think that the way the story and the characters are developed to explore these themes is just incredible. And speaking of the themes, right? I mean, if it was a dog, it would bite you. Um, Feminism is like conspicuously on display here, right? Um, how does Anna Biller weave this story about the feminist experience into a horror movie? Like, is that done efficiently, effectively? What did you think?
So there are a couple of really standout things that come forward here when you start to look at the feminist perspective in this movie. The first one that we talked about earlier is that very first conversation that Elaine has with Trish, and so we're presented with these two ideas of feminism and how it should exist, and that moment is very telling because of the idea that, you know, we've reached as a society so often about so many things where there's this opinion and there's this opinion, when obviously probably in the middle somewhere is where the finest solution lies. But we've become very tribal in so many beliefs that we have now, that there's only my way and your way. And so when we're first presented with that, we get these two obviously feministic ideas. You know, this one of my body, my power, and if I choose to be subservient, then as long as it's my choice, then that would, you know, and in from what I know, that is still, you know, a feminist idea. And then there's this other one of, no, I have the power, and, you know, like, therefore I make the decisions and I only do what I want. And so, you know, there's this idea that there's something in the middle there, right? Of having your power, but also, you know, part of being powerful being that you're willing to, you know, give some of it up. This is just a little sidebar here. Dave and I did approach and try to get a female on this episode. It was on our agenda.
There were a number of female co-hosts that we tried to get on here, all within the Geek Bro network.
Yes.
And every single person that we asked was tied up doing something else.
So if we say something that that is incorrect or crosses a line, then please feel free to tweet at us at ShiverPod. Let us know what we said wrong, because we'd love to hear from you, because we're shooting from the hip with this one, right? We've got the textbook idea of what these things should be, and we're kind of coming at you with it. So the other really just in your face moment about where you're faced with this ideal is when they go to the Summer Solstice Festival and we get the dueling internal monologues between Elaine and Griff.
That was such a jarring moment, but such a great moment. It's
so powerful and set to the backdrop of them being so happy in this mock marriage and at this, I believe they even called it a midsummer festival.
They did.
So set to that backdrop, you're getting her internal monologue where we're basically kind of getting a deeper understanding of what she told Trish at the beginning of just wanting love. And, if love means that she's got to give herself wholly to somebody, then that's what she's willing to do, which, it would be her choice. And then you've got this really weird thing coming from Griff, which until this moment, all we've known is Griff is a cop. He really likes this girl, but he's investigating her, but he wants to take her on a date. And then we get like this really gross, like red pill alpha male bullshit internal monologue that he starts spitting about how the feminist ideal the ideal of what does he call it? Like the feminine ideal, not feminist. There we go. Like the feminine ideal only exists when you first meet someone. And then as you get to know them, it just degrades and you're just left with this gross person who doesn't care. And you're suddenly just assaulted with this other side of Griff that is just gross.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, like there's no other word to describe his monologue that comes across. And when it's paired with her talking about, like Meatloaf, R.I.P. will do anything for love, but not that. Elaine will do that and more.
Right.
Elaine's idea of love is, I'm here for you. I'm ride or die. You want it, I do it. I got it. Let's go. And then so you're listening to her fall madly, deeply, truly in love with this guy. And then you're listening to him talk about how it's only a matter of time before she's essentially just going to be like a gross bag of meat. And it was so, you're jarring, I think is the word you used. It was so weird and so jarring. And like, it was,
especially since like we only had one other hint at his level of douchebaggery at the police precinct where he's joking around with the female police officer and he's clearly leading her on, but then he immediately talks to the other detective and he's like, oh, well, you know me, I'm not the settling down.
Right.
And it's like, whoa,
which is, a great James Cagney line.
Yeah. It's a great classic, like, movie, masculine, machismo guy.
Yeah, like Rock Hudson probably said that every day of his life.
yeah, I'm sure he did. For those listeners who are neither 70 years old nor have an appreciation for the finer vintage things in life, just look up Rock Hudson. You'll know what it's about. So there was like that kind of hint that maybe he was this very machismo sort of guy, and then we get that, and it's like, wow, man. And at that point, like, you feel for Samantha, even though she's like murdered two people essentially, like
manslaughtered.
Manslaughter for sure. For sure, manslaughter. Murder might be taking it far. But you feel for her because there clearly is trauma that she's trying to work through to get all of this stuff out of her system. But at the same time, like she still wants what she wants,
right?
And she deserves that.
Yeah,
the fact that no man can give it to her is one. I mean, not really her problem, and two, like intimately her problem, because it means that she stays alone.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, down to the fact that at the end we kind of see her. I mean, well, I guess we do see her snap, right? By the end of the movie, she's actually at least committed one full-blown murder.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but even then, like this idea of right before she makes the move to kill Griff, obviously there's a little bit of a psychotic break there. She starts seeing the vision of all these men that she loved, because that is one thing. That is one thing that it could be a trauma response. It could just be the way she was trained. But even after these men not fulfilling what she wanted, Samantha really did love all of these guys. For the short times that she knew them, even after she called the guy a pussy, she still very respectfully buried him and put the witch bottle with him to protect him. Mm-hmm. And she still talked about the men that she loved, even if they did her wrong or they didn't fulfill this idea of what she had. And she's suddenly like haunted by all of that. But
yeah, because we don't get that voiceover of Jerry or her father until after she buries the professor.
Right. We get that when she's maybe masturbating. She's rubbing herself with lotion, and there's some moaning going on.
Yeah, which I think was maybe the hottest scene in the whole movie. And I know that the point of this movie is like to work against the objectification of women, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. But oh my god,
no. I mean, there's that moment was insane. But but then right before she goes through with all of this, she sees that the tarot card, the heart with the 3 swords in it, right, which is always the future card that lets her know that this man isn't going to cut it. This isn't going to be the guy. And then suddenly we're sucked into this place where we realize that the thing that we've been presented with as what's going to save her is going to be what ends her. Like this devotion, like I said, psychotic break aside, this devotion to the witchcraft and to having to live out with what the cards say, so then she ends up killing him. And so it's just like, we said that, the witchcraft is what saved her, but also, I mean, it's what ended her. It's what brought about, just when she had nothing left. One other feminist ideal that was presented in this, I guess it's partially a feminist idea and it's partially a history lesson. We touched on it earlier, is this idea of the witch, just the witch in general. Just this idea that if a woman isn't what society views her as what she should be, then she's a witch. And man, do they come hard with that when she's in the bar with Griff. Yeah,
absolutely.
Like, I mean, down to the fact that
that scene is difficult to watch.
It is. And there are people literally yelling, burn the witch, and stripping her while we're watching guys unbuckle their pants and stuff. And it's like, this shit went sideways fast. And it was an interesting take on how quickly the hysteria of something like that can sweep through. They were obviously afraid already because they had pulled a body out of the river with a pentagram on it. And so they were, so at that point, it's like, they're just looking. They're just looking for a reason. And then, it's burn the witch, kill her. But then also there are these guys that are about to rape her. Like that whole scene was it was just, like I said, just sideways.
To me, it felt like a great callback, whether it was done intentionally or not, to The Crucible, which I'm sure we all read in high school, and we all certainly know about the Salem witch trials,
right?
And everything that went on in Salem and the surrounding areas, and indeed all of Europe. A couple hundred years before then, of course, America's always a little bit on the slow on the intake there, but
there were no planes back then. It took a long time to get across the ocean. Yeah, like, you know, when you look back and you know, not to do a history lesson here, but that's the thing. When you look back, even at the Salem witch trials, my parents just got back from Salem, I'd say just got back. They went in October. But my mom came back and she's just got pictures of all the headstones of all the witches that were lynched in Salem. And, you know, and once the dust cleared, and everybody looked back at the stories, it's like, man, that woman was killed because she owned land, you know, and at the time that was no, you don't get to own land. You're a witch. And, you know, and that's what we got here, but we got it with an actual literal witch, you know, like she called herself a witch. But again, that's how you do it. You bring it to the forefront by like persecuting an actual witch, you know, like you show what the hysteria around that, but something can be like, but you know, it's not just this ideal of a witch. It's like, no, this woman has said about 100 times that she's a witch. So
I really like the idea that a woman, not that I like the idea of this, but I like the allegory of how like a woman can feel so helpless in the way of romance and trying to be simply adequate for a man, that she feels like she has to turn to magic to make that happen. Because I know a number of women in my life, single women who are like fantastic people. And when I overhear them talk about this, you know, it's often with other women. They're not going to talk to a man about this, you know. And I'm not a snoop or anything like that, but it doesn't take very long to start picking up on, you know, the same things being said over and over again by single women. And Elaine's character, the way she feels, that's a very real thing.
Yeah.
And her being a witch and using sex magic to turn into love magic, like that's sure it's fantasy in the way that it's presented in the movie, but that's also the way that women actually feel. And to me, when you can take such a real thing and turn it into something that makes an engrossing movie that's fun and exciting to watch, but also horrifying to watch and beautiful to watch all at the same time, like you have created a work of literature and a work of art that is at once timeless and timely.
Yes. Timely is a great, because timely, it fits. I mean, it's amazing how you take all of these ideas and these throwbacks for this movie, and then you make something that is, you know, a hot take on modern culture, which is, you know, which is, I would only imagine a very hard crossroads to find. And so it did that very, very well.
Yeah.
So speaking of how well it did it, we have reached that point in the show where we are going to rate the movie. Now, if you are new to Shiver, we like to remind you, or I guess if you're new, we'd like to tell you, but if you listen all the time, we like to remind you that we only rate a movie against itself. And that's why every week we create a unique rating system. We go with something out of 5 that is related to this movie. And Dave absolutely knocked this one out of the park. One thing
which I never do,
which we talked about how when she buried the professor that Wayne that she had sex with, she left a witch bottle on his grave, and it was a very loving gesture. We would like to point this out. It was a very loving gesture,
in the same way that a cat might leave a dead lizard at the foot of your bed.
And so what that witch bottle was a used tampon jar full of piss. But she did make sure to tell us that tampons aren't gross. And she made that very clear. So it really encapsulates a lot about this movie to say it. So out of a possible 5, used tampon jar full of piss. Dave, what do you give The Love Witch?
So I went back and forth on this because I've used as a sort of litmus in the past whether I would tell someone they should watch this movie, whether I would recommend this movie or not. And I think I would be very judicious with who I recommend this movie to.
Right.
That said, this movie I think is so jaw-droppingly beautiful, and like from a technical standpoint, and it's so much fun to tear apart from a critical and literary analysis standpoint, and it's so meaningful and such an incredible work of passion and love by Anna Biller that I think to give this anything less than a 5 is doing a disservice to everyone involved. So I think that I do think I would give this a 5, even though I can't think of very many people offhand that I would recommend this movie to at this moment.
Right.
I think if the right person comes along, I would recommend this in a heartbeat. And I have already actually recommended this movie to a couple people. And the few who actually did sit down and watch it have told me that they did love this movie. So that is one of those like reassuring things. You know, when I tell someone, hey, you should watch this movie, and they say, oh, wow, that movie was really good. That's one of those reassuring things that, the movie is in fact as good as I initially thought it was. So I'm going to go with 5 on this.
Okay. I'm not going to go quite that high. And part of the reason is because of the fact that you're right. Like there's a very limited scope of people that I'm going to recommend this one to. While I think that I think that this did all of the things that set out to do well, I do think that you've got to have a really deep rooted love for the source material. Like just like back at the top when I said it's a lot like Kill Bill. If you don't have a love for a Kurosawa film, there are going to be things that happen in this movie that just take you completely out of the moment. Oranishi getting her head cut off being one of those moments, right? So and so there are plenty of times that happens in this movie. And for me, there were only a select few of them that I kind of was like, Most of the time, I felt like I was in on the joke. That was always an old podcast I had called What's Good. My co-host and I, Lewis, whenever we would look at things, we would always celebrate that moment when the creators were suddenly in on the joke and we're selling out towards that. And there is those moments where it's sold, where you're just like, okay, no, I get it. That was done on purpose. And so while I don't want that to take away necessarily from how much I like the movie, because I did really love it, I do see that as being something where it did occasionally happen too often. And, there could have been some longer stretches without something like that necessarily being a throwback. I'm not going to deduct a lot for it, though. We do full and half. I'm not going to take a whole star off for that. Like I would maybe go 4.25 if we did that, but I'm going to give this movie the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to ride it up to 4. I'm going to ride it up to 4.5. I did really, really like this. I like the way that a lot of this stuff was presented. I do look forward to watching this movie again and finding even more things. Like some of those. There were so many great little things that were just there that I didn't even think about till afterwards. Like that look of like the high cheek, unblended blush, and some of the hard cuts and just the real sudden fades that happen with there's no expectation of a fade being here, and suddenly you're just looking at a black screen. There's
even what I suspect are intentional editing mistakes, like continuity mistakes,
right?
And particularly in that the scene at the burlesque club where they're tearing her dress off. There, you see them tear the dress off. It cuts away, it cuts back, and her dress is half on. And then it cuts away, and it cuts back again, and the dress is like part way off. So it's one of those things where it's like the movie, like Biller went to such like painstaking lengths to like cover all the minutia of absolutely everything. Why is that there?
Right.
You know, it's one of those things where it's like it must be intentional, and that's something that happened a lot in those old Hammer Horton movies.
Yeah.
Because you're working on a shoestring budget, you're working on an awful time, regiment, and these things just happen.
Yeah.
So I think that for it being a love letter and a satire of those kinds of movies, like you really do have to have an affinity for them.
Oh yeah, I mean we are the target audience for this movie.
Absolutely,
the people who watch and listen to this podcast, they're the target audience for this movie. You know, there's a reason that it had a very, very limited U.S. release, and its box office numbers are abysmal, because this isn't the type of thing you're going to put in a big multiplex and is going to pull people in who are going to take it seriously at all. Like this is a laser focused audience. Like that this is shooting at, and it hit us perfectly. So,
which is why when you tend to look at what the reviews are for this movie, they're stellar, because the people who are reviewing this movie are its target audience.
It's 88, 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, I think. So the people who are taking the time to watch.
Oh, wow. 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the Metacritic score is 82%.
That's what I was thinking of, the Metacritic
really
score.
High for Metacritic.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. When this one finds where it's supposed to be in the hands of people like you and me, that's people realize how great this movie is. So there you have it. We are sitting at a firm 4.75 for The Love Witch. This was one I had no idea what to expect. So I was pleasantly surprised. I'm glad we've had a good debate on it. If you've enjoyed this, make sure you head to geekbro.net or shiverpod.com, which will just take you over to geekbro.net, where you can find all of our Shiver stuff. But you can also find a bunch of other podcasts on the Geek Bro Network, including What's Up Bro, which is recording at the same time as us. So maybe you're a little bit back and forth. We've also got Mount Geekmore with Dave and I discussing all sorts of things. Yesterday, we did an episode that turned out way better than it had any business being, talking about super pets.
It really did.
And so you can also find our sister podcast, Crimacopia, in case you're wondering what the real world is like. When we're looking at the movie version of horror, they're talking about the real life version of horror. We've got Comedy Fitness, A Dose of Ellie, Seasons, a TV podcast, Kick Flicks. It's all there. If you like it, except for sports, apparently was pointed out to us. It basically anything you're into, we've got a podcast for it over at geekbro.net. If you're interested in Shiver, make sure you follow us on all the social medias. We are at ShiverPod. And you may be unaware, but you can actually leave reviews of podcasts on Spotify now. So if you listen to us on Spotify, it'd be great if you hit us with a 4 or 5 star. Let us know what you think. Help move us up that algorithm. See if we can get recommended to some new folks.
A good boost to the old confidence is never a bad thing.
Not at all. So we have got a whole month of different types of love. Let's present it like that. We've got a full month of different types of love lined up for you here in February. This time next week, we are going to be watching the original My Bloody Valentine.
So excited for this.
I have never seen this. I've only seen the remake with Jensen Ackles, My Bloody Valentine 3D. So I'm very excited to watch this. My mom commented on our Shiver post about it and said she went to see it in theaters at 81, I believe is when it came out.
1981.
And she said like her and her best friends were the only ones in the theater. So very excited to watch that. We're going to do a movie that Netflix claims only like 17 out of 100 people finished when it premiered a couple years ago, called Veronica, about the love of a daughter and her dad. And then at the end of the month, we're going to be doing something that Dave has been scratching and clawing for. And we are going to review that sweet, sweet love between a monster and his need for a mate as we watch The Bride of Frankenstein. We're going back to the 30s at the end of February, folks.
It was shot down when we first started Shiver Up in 2017 or so. I said, "Hey guys, what if we do Frankenstein or Dracula, or better yet, The Bride of Frankenstein?" And they said, "Nah, dude." And I said, "Okay. What?" And everything was just shot down. Right. It's about time we go back to basics here.
So right? this month will mark the first full month of recordings where every one of these movies is something I'm just seeing for the first time, because I've actually I've seen Frankenstein, but I've never seen Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So we've got plenty to bring you here. Like I said, make sure you follow us at Shiver Pod. Give us a like, comment on something, give us a share. All that stuff moves us up. Dave, sound good?
Oh, I am here to watch you pop your cherry week after week after week. I'm really excited about this. I'll be with you on February 16th for Veronica. That'll be the first time, or Veronica,
yes,
because it is from España.
It is indeed,
and that is exciting, the motherland for me. So I mean, Wreck, right? I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
there's some pedigree there.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Plus, love a good movie with subtitles because I crunch very loudly so I can snack all I want. Never miss a thing.
It doesn't matter.
Never miss a thing. So, from us here at Shiver Pod to you, we hope you enjoyed the show. Fright you very much.